Welcome to Show and Share. I'm Sue Landay from Trainers Warehouse, and today I'm with David Dye from Let's Grow Leaders. He's the president, along with Karen Hurt, and he is the co-creator also of Synergy Stack System. So David got his start in the nonprofit world. He even was an elected official at a very young age. I met him fairly recently at the National ATD conference and really loved his tool and thought that the Synergy Stack could help us think about helping both ourselves and the leaders in our organizations um, get a good start and think about how strategically we want to set goals and be able to set them in a way that we can actually meet them and be changed and have them guide us. So I'm delighted that he's here with us. Another fun fact about David before he gets started that I love is that he met his wife, Karen, professionally. They started working together, writing a book together, and then said, I think we should do a little bit more with this partnership. And so I love that story, David. And I'm going to now pass it on to you to introduce Synergy Stack and how that can be used.
Oh, thanks, Sue. And on that note, I had a friend of mine one time. He said, if you co-author a book, you're either going to love that person or hate that person. So I'm glad that it worked out that way for us. So that's my advice for finding love after 40. All right, so let's go. So thank you for being here. We're talking about planning and goal setting strategies that fuel change, and I just want to take a few minutes to go over, to talk about a couple of principles of change that I know are familiar to anyone. If you're on this call right now, I know they're familiar, and how we can use them ourselves and use them with teams we serve. And then, as Sue mentioned, talk about how we've incorporated these principles in the Synergy Stack after 2 years of product development and testing and so forth. So I want to start by asking you, and if you're willing to chat in, I'd love to get that from you. I was back in August, I was with a group of pharmaceutical CEOs from Europe. And so these folks had brought me in because they wanted help creating a culture of urgency. You can imagine they've got to get these, and some of these were really life-changing potential medications, and they need to get them to market, but there's always a race to do that, so they're trying to create urgency. You can imagine a New Year's resolution. We're planning, we need to have more urgency, need to have more empathy, need to have whatever it is. So I want to ask you a question that I asked them. And the question is this: what does soon mean to you? And I'll give you even more context. If I said, hey, I need that data soon, what does soon mean for you? And you just type in your answer. Not anybody else's answer, but if I asked you and I said I needed that soon, what would that mean for you? I'd love to hear what you've got to say. What does soon mean? Sue is doing the next hour or today or this week. Well, it depends. It depends on who's asking. All right, Mary, thank you. The next few days. Sure. Soon means within the next 24 hours, and it depends on who. Thanks, Jen. Nora, give me a drop dead date, please. Yeah, Nora's like, I'm not having any of this soon nonsense. Absolutely.
Too vague.
Too vague. Sarah, by the end of the day or next day. So, okay, we've had, I don't know, half a dozen answers, and you can see the range of responses in that. And by the way, those CEOs, all of whom are pushing for a culture of urgency in their organization, exact same range. There were about 15 of them on the call. And we had answers ranging everywhere from immediately to it's never happening because it'll go to the bottom of the list. I need something definite. Jen, if I tell myself I'm doing something soon, it usually means never. There you go. Exactly. Yeah. Let's define that. And this is part of the challenge with any kind of change that we're trying to do, right? Is that kind of vague intention doesn't lead to action necessarily. So when we talk about kind of these fundamentals of change, I just want to tap into three that I think are often ignored. We know them. We all know them. But in terms of our facilitation work, in terms of our training, in terms of our own efforts at whatever change we're trying to make for ourselves, it's easy to ignore or leave some of these out. And so the first one is people have to want the change. And change doesn't happen to people. People have to want it themselves. So how do we do that as trainers, do that as facilitators? we got to want it. Then we've got to own it. And I know this was in the pre information that Sue put out for
Teaser.
today's the teaser, right? We got to want it, we got to own it. And by own it, I mean I have to take responsibility for it myself. If it's done to me, if the reason for it doesn't resonate, if I have no ownership of it, highly unlikely that it's going to happen. And then the third element, this gets into the problem with soon, is we have to know how to change. Get very specific. And so often our change efforts, we get, I need it soon. I need more urgency. I need to be more committed. What do any of those things mean? They're so broad, they're not specific. So how do we engage in that kind of change? Well, just for a little bit of background, Sue gave me enough of an introduction, but Karen and I have written three traditionally published books: Winning Well, Manager's Guide to Getting Results Without Losing Your Soul. That was the one that brought us together. Most recently, Powerful Phrases for Dealing with Workplace Conflict. But all of them based in research, and that research underlies everything that I'm about to share with you, which is why I mentioned that. So when we go into people have to want the change, where does that come from? I mean, this is connecting back to our why. And so how do we help people tap into their own desire? I'm never going to succeed helping somebody to change or helping myself to change by taking somebody else's why. It just doesn't work, right? So when we talk about vision, helping them create and embody their shared vision. If it's a team, it's a shared vision. If it's an individual, it's just my own vision. And I look at this for myself. I have wrestled with weight loss my entire life. It's one of those things. I'm one of those people. I've been big since I was a kid. And I've had people talk to me and say, David, you need to lose weight because X, Y, Z. They're not wrong, but those reasons never motivated me. Never did. What motivated me finally to do something about it was staring at my own mortality when I had a blood pressure spike a while back, looking at my grandkids and going, oh my goodness, I want to be around for them. And then some competitive fun things of like, I love climbing mountains. I love hiking up 14,000-foot mountains. And I've found trail running as an adult that I never knew that it was a thing. Those are all things that motivated me and gave me a vision that was compelling to me. Had nothing to do with some of the other reasons that other people would give. So how do we help people tap in and embody their vision of that future? And as we do that with teams, when we're talking about organizational or team performance, I come back to, we call this the performance loop. And these four elements, and I know that these will be familiar to you, but I like to ground us in these as we talk about helping teams achieve or set meaningful goals, planning their strategies, and so forth. Because if teams are not performing, there are always one or more of these that are suffering. And these are also, when we talk about the synergy stack, these are the four dimensions of team performance that we focus on. So the first is connection. We know one another as human beings. Second is clarity. We have a shared understanding of success. So often teams struggle because we're not working off the same script. Curiosity. We're genuinely interested in one another's perspectives and what's possible, and we're asking questions about what could go wrong or what's at stake and so forth. A lot of teams don't ask those questions, and all the negative consequences that can happen or get in the way of achieving those goals. And then commitment. We have a clear shared agreement. And commitment is not an act of willpower. Commitment is specificity about what it is we're doing, those next steps, and the specifics of how we're going to get there, and what does soon mean. So a couple of key questions for each of these, just as we're thinking about these dimensions. Connection, do we know one another as human beings? Do we trust our team? Does our team trust us? And do people feel that we care about one another as human beings? When it comes to clarity, it's, do we have a shared understanding of success? Does everyone understand what a successful outcome does? And there's, again, another common element that's missing in so many teams is, okay, this is the task, or this is the project, or this is the thing we're trying to achieve, but do we know why we're doing that? Do we know why I need to file that in that particular way, or why this data needs to be presented in the way it does? What's this outcome of that?
I think that clarity also helps you know what soon, it gives context to soon, going back to your initial question,
Exactly.
right? If you understand what the task is, then soon may mean something different.
It gives that context. You're absolutely right, 100%. curiosity. Are there alternatives that we should be considering? What would prevent success if we don't address it? What other perspectives or experiences should we consider? And then finally getting us back even to soon with the shared agreements. If when we're talking about intention, and we all know like SMART goals and all that kind of thing, like we all know those elements of goal setting and all that kind of thing. What keeps us from that as teams are these elements. And so when we're talking about a shared agreement, that comes back to what is our shared why? What is the shared purpose? Are we closing the loop with celebration and accountability? I always look at celebration and accountability. They're two sides of the same coin. We set an intention, and either we did it, in which case we celebrate, high five, good job, confetti if it's a big deal, or we practice accountability. Hey, we didn't do that. What happened? What can we learn from that? How can we renew our commitment or take action? And then that we're practicing that direct, timely accountability with one another. So again, to do all of these things, it's intention, but the element that is critical here, we got to own it. So we've got our vision of the future, we've got reality today. Once we can create that gap for people, and this is like fundamentals of coaching, right? What does a person want? Where are you today? All right, as soon as we have created that tension, as soon as we've created that gap, now people are starting to own their change. They're feeling that tension. It's not created, it's not given to them, it's theirs. So what are you willing to do about it? If I have my own vision of the future, or the team as a whole has their picture of the future, and we've got our reality today, and we know what's possible if we can get there, now we've created some tension that engages people. That's the fuel that drives change. The final element then is the how. How do we help them? And this is where we're going to spend the majority of the time with the Synergy Stack here in the few minutes we have. So if we're talking about what does soon mean, what does committed mean, or urgent, or any of these kinds of things, one of my favorites is empathy. And we had a client call us in to help their frontline customer service folks. They're the team leaders for the customer service people were struggling to coach their reps. And they wanted us to come in and help them with some leadership development and to improve performance for their customer service reps. And so we listened to one call. And the first call we listened to, this was crazy. This elderly woman calls in, and the call went like this. She said, hi, I'm Mrs. Jones, and I've never called you before. This was a heating oil company, so in the Northeast. And I'm afraid I'm going to run out of oil. I don't know what to do. There's snow coming. See, my husband died last week, and I've never had to call you before. He always did that, but I think I might run out of oil. And the service rep said, oh, Mrs. Jones, thank you so much for calling. Be happy to help you. And while I'm looking up your account information, if you can give me your number, please, let me remind you that we're open 24/7, and we often also offer plumbing services. Now, you don't have to be a customer service expert to know that's not a great call, do you? What's missing in that call?
I'm so sorry your husband died.
Thank you, Nora, right? I mean, no, zero empathy, like, come on. And, and we're just astounded, like, oh no, is this what all is happening? And so we asked the vice president, said, can we listen to any of your good calls? Because clearly that's not a great call. And she said, well, no. And we said, are you kidding me? You don't have any good calls? She said, no, we have some great calls. We've got some great reps. The problem is that call you just listened to, it's scored well. We said, what are you talking about? She said, all right, well, let me show you. They had a checklist of 55 items that the reps had to achieve. And on that list did they mention that did they use the customer's name? Did they mention that they're open 24/7? Did they bridge to other services? Did they ask the account number? Did they document the account? On and on and on. And that call had checked 52 of those 55 boxes, but it had missed one critical box. And so we got all the vice presidents together, said, what are the 4 components of a great call for you? And they said, oh, easy. Empathy. Did we make that emotional connection with the customer? Did we handle their thing with confidence? Did we, what was the other? They had a time frame to it of 40 seconds. They needed to get to resolution and then documenting the account. And then creating a wow experience. There were 5 of them. So we said, okay, if those are your 5 most important elements of a good call, let's put those on the front page of the checklist. Get those 5, and then you can go to the other 50 items on the list if you need to. So that helped, got everything settled a little bit. But you can imagine what happens next is you've got people coaching and saying, hey, you know what? You didn't really have empathy on that call. And the rep says, well, what are you talking about? Of course I did. So now we've got a what does soon mean problem. What does empathy mean? So we got all the reps together and said, let's talk about empathy. Okay, we wrote a bunch of sticky notes and said, I want you to write down when you think of empathy and what it means to be empathetic, especially for your customer, what is one behavior? It's observable. I can see it, I can hear it. One behavior per sticky note, and list as many as you can. And then we took all those sticky notes, put them on the wall, and then all the reps grouped similar topics together until you had clusters of related specific behaviors. And so then they aligned on, okay, and you can sticky dot and vote and so forth, but aligned on what are the 5 or 6 that it means for us to have empathy with our customers, getting very specific down to the level of habits, observable repeated behaviors. And so they could say, okay, so they reflect to connect. I acknowledge their feeling, their problem. I'm paraphrasing, repeating back what I'm hearing. I'm validating their feelings. What I hear you say is, gosh, that must be so hard, whatever that might be. So now the coach has the ability to have a meaningful conversation about empathy. Hey, listen, you by and large, very empathetic call. You definitely were reflecting back the emotion, took their problem on as your own. You let them talk, got the information out. When it comes to undivided attention, you did have your colleague interrupt and ask that question. And I did see that you put on mute and handled that. So that was not 100% on that, but overall good. Okay, now we've got a concrete conversation happening. And so any kind of change that we're trying to get to, how do we get down to the level of specific habits? And that is really where our work, when it comes to leadership development, team development, anything that we do is focused on specific, practical, applicable habits. And when we're talking about creating lasting change, that is the most often missing piece. That's the most common missing piece that we see. And so that's why we created the Synergy Stack. So the other element of all of this, and Sue and I were talking about how much more is happening in person, and we're happy to see that because tactile experience, social interaction, you know this, it enhances learning and retention. And that's not just me saying that. There's a ton of research that goes into that. And I know, Sue, you probably want that slide so you can have a quiz later on, right? So we created the Synergy Stack system to help teams accelerate performance, achieve, and do these 3 things on their own with just a little bit of training facilitation juice. The idea is that if teams can own their own vision of the future, they can sense that gap as we just help them experience it a little bit and then get super practical in how they do that. And so the accelerate. Go ahead, Sue.
Let's talk about how specifically you use the deck. So I have one here.
Yep.
And it has all of the cards. And on each card, there's all of these different kind of components of, for each of those: clarity, connection, there's quotes, there's questions, things to think of. How do these help you do what you just discussed?
Exactly.
How do they help you kind of hone in on the why it matters and owning it and making it happen?
So I'm going to stop the share so I can just hold one card up to the screen. So this is just a representative card. There are 48 of these. Each of them, as Sue was mentioning, has up at the top a habit, and this one is check for understanding, has an expanded definition of the habit. In this case, I ensure the message sent is the message received. And then at the bottom, there's a quote, which is a sample expression of words that someone might use in the expression of that habit. So in this case, so here's what I understand we're going to do next. Do I have that right? So you can imagine the amount of headache, heartache, and soul ache that happens because teams are not on the same page with their communication. So checking for understanding is one habit that can help teams with their communication. This is a teal card, so this is a clarity card. So when we're talking about how to use the deck, and I'm going to go ahead and pop the share back up here. When we help teams create, there are 24 different activities, and more than that actually, that you can do with this Energy Stack system. But when we help teams to identify a vision of their future, and you'll have your ways of doing that. We have an activity that helps you to do that as well. When you help teams to do that, you then tie into the specific habits. I'm just going to walk you through one of my very favorite examples of an activity here. I will give each person a deck, or a team, if you've got 10 people, can share one deck and lay it all out. But I'll have people go through and say, I want you to share, go through and find, of these 48 habits, I want you to find the one that's your super habit, the one that comes most easily to you. That if you're awake and alive, you're contributing that to the team. And so they go through and they find theirs, and I'm just going to say, grab one randomly. If this person says, I ask for feedback, I invite your perspective, I consider what you say. And this person says, I check for understanding. This person says, and so everybody goes around. Then you ask, okay, let's take a look at the colors of those cards. And what do those mean?
And can I just interrupt for 1 second? So some of the other habits that you might find on the cards, like for the connection, clarify my values, I listen actively, I ask for feedback, I find fun. For curiosity, it might be, I ask courageous questions, I ask first, I share ideas, I invite input. For commitment, it might be, I schedule the finish. I do what I say. I speak with candor. I honor deadlines. So just to kind of give a range of what you might find on those 48 cards.
Thanks, Sue. So we take whatever super habits people have identified, then we introduce the dimensions and we say, hey, here's what the colors mean. Those colors have meaning, and here's that they're all good, they're all meaningful. So whatever you chose is great. But have everybody hold up. And if we were doing this and everybody had one, we'd all hold up our cards and ask the team, what do you notice? And inevitably, there will be one color that's at deficit, sometimes two, but often one color that's not as common. And you say, oh, hey, so how does that show up for us? I was doing this with a team of scientists, medical testing scientists, and they had very little green, very little connection in their group. And one of them laughed and she said, we suck at this. We're all so analytical. All right, cool. Now we go to vision and we say, all right, and if we have time, we can do an extended visioning activity. If it's shorter time, I'll just have people close their eyes. And I want you to think, really imagine this team performing at its very best, whatever we're capable of. And I want you to picture it. I want you to hear it. What's happening? And so I'm trying to get people to embody that sensation, that vision of what's possible. And you can do that in an extended way, and you certainly got ways to do that, and we've got them in the activity guides. But then we send everybody back to their deck. Okay, with that vision in mind of what's possible, I want you to go back to your deck, and I want you to choose one or two habits, but this time you're choosing on behalf of the entire team of what you think it will take for the team to achieve that vision. And so everybody goes back and they find them, say, okay. And then you have people discuss, what did you choose and why? Or if time is shorter or you have a larger group, you can do a grand reveal and have everybody on the count of 3 hold them up if it's online, or put them on the table if it's in person. And inevitably what happens is, with no planning, the team will align around 1 or 2 specific habits. So they'll, some people, let's say that we've got a team that's lacking that connection. And so half of the group, they choose some green cards. And most of those cards say something like, I need to I need to find out more about your pet's people and projects and know you outside of just the work. And we say, okay, why did you choose that? Why did half of the group choose that one? And this is a real life example. And they said, because if I know you as a human being, I'm not going to challenge your data. I know that when you're challenging mine, it's because you care about the project, not just because you're trying to be a jerk to me, which is my default reaction anytime anybody questions my data. So if we can build that human connection, it's going to make our life and make our work easier, and we're going to do better as a team as a result. So, okay. All right. So as a group, they've aligned around a specific behavior. Now what? Now we get super specific. So again, so much change takes too much energy, too much time. We're not specific enough. Too big. 21 days. What's one activity as a team that you can invest in for the next 21 days? If we say 6 months, that feels like an eternity. It's too big. There's no way I'm going to be able to keep that up. But for 21 days, if it's a team activity, that means at most probably once a week or twice a week. So we're only having to do this 3 times and we can get some benefit from it. So what this team did was they said easy. So at the beginning of our meetings, we're going to take 5 minutes and we're going to ask some personal questions. And they rotated responsibility. A different person was going to bring in the question specific to learn more about one another, and then somebody different would take that each week. There's no brain surgery there, right? Any of us could design that activity. What's the magic? The magic is that they figured it out themselves. So working with another group, and they said
Can I just
that they needed.
interrupt for
Yeah,
one
go
other
ahead, Sue.
question? Sorry, I'm sensitive to time and I want to give other folks an opportunity to ask questions as well. But I'm curious if you use this tool not just for like leadership consulting,
Mhm.
but within a training context, if you're teaching leadership and management skills and communication skills, how you might then take this tool and use it as a training resource.
Yes, absolutely. So if we go back to the performance loop and those 4 elements, that every team needs all 4 of those things to be there. So from a training perspective, I'll often start a session by having whatever topic we're discussing that day, by having people identify that for themselves. So, and I'm going back to what Nora was talking about even before we started, which was, from a conference perspective and building your own kind of a session there and really identifying the needs. When I have people self-assess where they're needing information, where they're wanting to invest in a skill, immediately before anything else happens, they've already created some ownership for whatever we're going to be talking about that day. But even more important, I'm finding out as a facilitator, as a trainer, what it is they need. And so where their interest is in learning. And so that immediately is a way to, I find, up-level any kind of training or
But just to
facilitation.
make the training more meaningful, no
Yeah,
matter what the training is.
exactly. Here's what I will say on this is that I've been working with this for a number of, I don't know, about 8 months now, after 2 years of product development. One of the things that is most meaningful to me is that I'm hearing from PhDs and frontline shift workers who are telling me the same thing, that this gives me the words to have the conversation with my colleagues. I don't necessarily like talking about myself, this is one person said. And one person said, I have autism. I find it very hard to engage, and I don't understand what other people are saying and emoting sometimes, but this is helping me have those words. Executive teams that have pulled it together the same way. So it's that giving us the specific, practical, tangible ways to engage and have those conversations, whether it's in a training context, whether it's in a planning context like we were talking about, lots of different applications. So when, ultimately it's about creating that specific sprint forward. So the 21-day plan, if we're doing a planning kind of a thing, they choose a specific way forward. So I want to pause there and mention that the entire thing is also backed by an online resource center that has all the activity guides. This is an example of just one activity guide, but all laid out there for you. There's a multimedia resource center behind it. Every single habit, every single connect with empathy, know you beyond your work, every single habit of those 48 habits has an article and either a video or a podcast or some multimedia content behind it to help teams invest in their learning. And this is what that looks like: start of an article, video, so forth.
Excellent. And let's take another pause and just kind of check in with the group about, I've asked you a bunch of questions. I want to make sure I give folks an opportunity to ask as well.
Absolutely. And the first question comes from Jen in the chat there. And Sue, that's a question for you. Um,
Uh,
from in terms of
your
distribution for Canada.
distributor, we ship to Canada.
Yeah, so I think the
And
import fees are gonna kill me on this. It's already coming over 200 US, which is like 270 Canadian. So it's too much for me.
Sarah, do you know if we also have an ability to ship through the US Postal Service that might be different? Or David, I don't know, do you guys send, I know that you're drop shipping these. Can
Yeah,
you?
so
Canada?
yeah, so I can. We ship internationally, and so we have an international distributor that's different, Sue, than our U.S. distributor for this very reason.
Okay.
So Jen, if um, I want to
We'll
make sure that we honor trainer warehouse price and commission and so forth, so I need to work that out with you. But
we'll get you a price on the shipping so that we can figure that out.
Yeah,
Um,
that'd be great. Yeah, just I work in public sector, as you know, so it's dollars are very
Yeah.
scarce.
yeah,
yeah, so I'll look up your email address. I won't make you put it in the in the chat right now. I'm sure we have access to that.
thanks for the question, Jen.
Yeah.
What other
And I think
questions?
Melody just raised, was that you who raised your hand? Somebody raised their hand. Did I miss that? Go ahead, Nora.
Well, I'm looking at the picture online. I just clicked on the link and it looks like a great party. Lots of great people around tables. That looks like fun. I like the hands-on, everybody reaching in. And if there's more than a half a dozen people, looks like you need a deck for each table. Is that correct?
Yes, so if the largest I go, Nora, is one deck per 10 people. So in that particular conference is those were 10 tops. So I don't know that that table has 10 people, might only have 8, but I don't do more than one deck per 10 people. It tends to then get to, you just can't fit that many people around a table comfortably.
And what happens when two people want the same card?
Great, immediate connection. And so, from a facilitation standpoint, and say, okay, if both of you have got your finger on that card or have pulled that card, group together, and when it's your turn to talk, yeah, I chose. That's not uncommon, and it's amazing to me when you're talking about what are the thing that you would choose for all of us. You will often have 3 or 4 people choosing the same one, and that tells you something. But now, this is my favorite comment ever. A manager watched that happen, watched the team choose their path forward, and came over to me and said, David, the team just figured out in 45 minutes for themselves what I have been trying to tell them for the last 6 months. And now they own it, and they've
Yeah.
got their path forward.
And why is it just a leadership deck? It seems to me like line staff need this very same tool.
I would consider it for all teams, Nora. The leadership facilitation from a team building perspective, from my magic bullet, my holy grail, if you will, of what I have wanted to do in this space is create a way for teams to figure it out themselves. And that to me is what we're after here. And so from a leadership perspective, someone's got to introduce it and bring it to the table, but that's it. And from there, that's the facilitation juice it takes. And by the way, anybody who has a deck, there is a card in there that has a QR code that allows them to go, it's free once you have your deck, to register for the Resource Center, which includes all the activity guides, all of the multimedia support. So again, teams can do this themselves once they have it.
And I also, to your question about how many decks might you need, we just put this product live on Trainers Warehouse site a week or 2 ago and just began working with David and Karen. So we listed it just for the single unit price. However, they have some pretty good discounts for multiple decks, and we don't have that on our site yet, but we will be posting that. So if you wanted to kind of, buy 10 or more decks, we can make that more feasible for you.
Definitely.
What other questions do we have? And I've taken some notes also because I'd like to change our listing on our website. These sessions are always so informative. You know, we kind of take a write-up and then hearing how it may be used and applied is always just so illustrative to me. So we keep
And
adding.
David, are you willing to share that slide that you said you knew Sue would want? Because I want it, which is about the research that goes behind the why experiential learning. That's my jam, right? That one right
Oh,
there.
love it. Yeah, no, it's funny, you know, you share a bullet research slide and joke about it, but there is always at least one person who wants that slide. Happy to share.
I couldn't copy it fast. I couldn't screenshot it fast enough. You moved it past too fast.
No problem, Nora. So, Sue, why don't I, after we're done, I'll send you a PDF and you can send it to folks. Will that work?
That'd be great. And often what I'll do after these sessions is, in addition to posting the actual event on our website, I'll put together um, just a blog post of some of the key points and learning and perspective that came out of it. And I can add that as a resource as well. So that's just another good resource that we all have.
Well, I'd love to see if there are other questions. And as we're taking those, lots of different applications here. So, and we talked about a few of them. So whether you're doing planning, team development, I will use this in a one-on-one coaching. I use it for my self-development as well. Taking and just transparently, one of the cards that I chose for myself in 2024 was showing up with more curiosity and specifically asking, how does this look from your perspective? That's specific enough. And I had my vision, I had my why, I had all the things, but it gave me the how that I wanted to do and to practice that very, very specifically. And we can break behavior change down to something that small and that specific, it becomes achievable.
Great. Ditto. Thank you, Jen. Any more questions?
The other thing I would mention is that we do offer a certification in facilitate. You don't have to be a certified facilitator to use it. You have it, you're off and running, and many people feel comfortable that way. But we do have advanced training and things that go with to further support facilitators that really want to dive into the nuts and bolts and make it their own.
Thank you. Well, let me thank all of you and thank David especially for joining us today. Love this tool, love thinking about it and hearing about it, and appreciate your being here. Thank you.